Hey guys, Sharpend here, and in this video we're going to make airy guitars and synths in the style of the 1975. The end result will sound something like this. So this video was inspired by the bridge in It's Not Living If It's Not With You, where it has like some cool synths, a synth bass, and a very cool airy guitar sound. It sounds something like this. And I wanted to go ahead and try to recreate that. So the first thing you need is a bass guitar, and if you're like me and you don't have a bass guitar, what I did is I just took a very basic saw wave and I just created a short click for it with decay, and I've just added some amp simulation, which really makes it sound like a bass guitar, or like at least pretty close. If you do have a bass guitar, use the bass guitar, it will probably sound a lot better. In addition to that, there's also a bass block. So for this one, I've used pigments and I've used the analog engine with 3 saw waves. 2 of them are being detuned, one slightly up and one slightly down. So we get a unison effect. We also have some unison at 3 voices and a very low detune amount. There is no sustain on the volume envelope and a decay of 1.4 seconds. And we also have a low pass filter with some resonance, and it is being opened by another envelope, like so. And now let's go into the effects. So we also have some slight distortion at soft clip mode, and it is being increased using this envelope, so we get a more clicky sound at the start of it. I have some chorus here and a high pass filter that slightly removes some of the very low frequencies. That's because we already have a bass guitar in that section. We don't need them to interrupt one another. And then there's a sort of modulation that's happening in the original song, where at the beginning you hear the synth in the background, and then it sort of gets more and more growly and intense. So I wanted to recreate that movement, and in order to do that, I've made a macro for this. So this macro controls a lot of things. It controls the filter, it opens it up. It also increases the resonance by a bit. It increases the sustain on the volume envelope to give it more body as it opens up. And it also adds some FM modulation to the first oscillator. And as you can see here, the modulation source is 50% the third oscillator and 50% the noise oscillator, which is set to white noise. In addition to that, this macro also opens up the high pass filter a bit more, so we get an even more high pass sound. And altogether you get something like this. So as you can hear, the FM makes it a bit more growly and intense, and the high pass filter makes sure that it doesn't become too overpowering in the low end especially, and also kind of follows the movement in the original. So in addition to that, I've also used a compressor to just give it some more body again, and a filter because we don't really hear it in the beginning of the bridge, but right here it gets more and more open and we really hear all of the high frequency content. So I've used the filter to just remove the high frequency content from the start and increase it as necessary, like so. And without the filter and the compressor, it would sound like this. Which is nice, but it also means that we can hear the high frequency content throughout the whole bridge, and it's not like in the original. So in addition to that, there's also an LFO pad that sounds like this. So this is a pretty simple pad. I've used a sine wave with some harmonics, so more of a triangle wave, a lot of unison voices with some detuning. There's a low pass filter with some resonance that is being opened up by an envelope, like so. And there's also another engine with some noise oscillator. Let's hear it alone. This is the noise oscillator that is being opened up by this envelope, which is very short. So we just get a click sound. And there's also a square oscillator just to give it some more depth. So altogether you get this. And they also have some chorus and a tiny bit of reverb with a short decay. And just a high pass filter removing the very sub low end frequencies. And then in the effects, I've also added a tremolo that has the shape of a saw wave falling down. So it just gives it more of a clicky sound in the volume section. Like so. So altogether we get this. And now for the star of the show, the sort of very airy guitars. So I figured how to make this by listening to the original, and you have like sort of a high-end sound that sort of slows down. And this high-end sound is very clicky, so I figured I'd try and recreate that using an actual guitar. So the first thing I did was record my guitar direct into FL Studio. And it doesn't sound very bright or high-end at all. So the first thing I did to improve that is just split that into the high frequencies. And for the high frequencies, I've used Fresh Air, which adds a lot of high-end content. Here it is without it. And here it is with it. And as for the low end and the mids, I've added some compression to give it some more sustain. Here it is without it. And altogether we get this sound, which is a lot more full. And then I've decided to take a ride cymbal and just layer it on top of the guitar. So together we get this sound. And you want to use a ride that has mostly high-end content and not a lot of mids, because some rides do have a lot of mids and that would be not too great for this sort of sound. And then I've sent both of these back into my amplifier and I've set it to a setting that's clean, so no distortion, nothing too crazy, just a basic amp setting. And the thing about guitar amps is that they don't reproduce the entire frequency spectrum, so you don't get a lot of the very high-end content of the frequency spectrum. So it automatically sort of like blended the ride, which has a lot of high-end content, with the guitar that doesn't have that much high-end content. So you get this. Which sounds a lot more blended, and it actually sounds like just a guitar. It doesn't have all of that harsh ride content. So just reamping it makes it sound very coherent. But then we need to add some effects to make it complete. So the first effect I've added was an EQ, just to remove the lows a bit, because we already have the bass guitar, and this guitar needs to be very airy and soft. So this is just bringing more focus into the high end and the high mids of this guitar. And as for the high end frequency content, it sort of sounds like it's slowing down a bit. I've used a tremolo effect, and I've just increased the rate of the tremolo at the start of the sound and reduced the rate as it goes on. So you get something like this. But I didn't want to make it too obvious like in the original, so it's at like 50% mix. So you can sort of hear it's there, but it's not too overpowering. And then I've added a dimension plugin, which is sort of like a soft chorus effect. And it adds a lot of width without sounding too obvious. And this is very important for the reverb. Without this width, it would sound a lot smaller. And for the reverb, I've used Valhalla Supermassive. So I've just taken a preset from here. It's called Splashy Synth, and I've messed around with it a bit. I've changed the delay settings so that it doesn't get too overpowering. I want the reverb to stop as soon as the next guitar hit happens, so that it doesn't like blur the entire thing together. And I've also reduced the depth of the modulation and the modulation rate by quite a bit, because I don't want it to be too detuned. It's not a detuned reverb sound, it's more of a clean reverb sound. The EQ is set all the way up, so we get all of the high frequencies. It's at 50% mix, and the width is at -50% because the guitars aren't too wide in the original as well. So you get something like this. And together with the bass and the synth and everything, we get something like this. And it sounds pretty close, and it's kind of amazing how we got from this sound into something so coherent and pretty damn close to the original as well. So that is pretty much it, and I hope you liked this video. I'll see you in the next one. For more content, make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well, and check out my playlists on the channel for other tutorials, track breakdowns, and my music as well.